Hey there, welcome back to the Badass Business Planning course. We're still in Module 2 where we're talking about your uniqueness. And here in Lesson 2, we're going to be talking about your core competencies. This is the first block in the Your Uniqueness column of the knowledge brand canvas. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, again, before I dive in, I mentioned this in the intro to this module. These lessons are going to be short because we cover them elsewhere. And the core competencies we cover in Online Marketing Foundations, Module 2, Lesson 4. We go deep. I think it's like a 25 or 30-minute lesson about understanding these things. But to help you understand why this is important to planning, this is like understanding what your business is good at, because early on when you're building a business, your strengths, the things that you're really good at, are effectively what your business is really good at. And so you need to recognize what are those strengths, but also what are the weaknesses that you have, because if you don't think about that, you're going to potentially create a business that's not in alignment with what you're good at. And so, for example, my strengths, among other things, are in influencing and persuading people in kind of a one-to-many environment. That is some of the stuff that I'm very good at naturally. And so understanding that will help me to potentially tailor how I build a business. So me finding ways to connect with large groups of people and influence them should be part of how I build my business. That's why I do thought leadership. I'm very much coming up with new ideas and influencing people to my perspective on things. So that's a small example of how this type of thing plays into your business. But on the other side, and one of the examples I've always used is like, if you are an introvert, if your personality says you will be completely drained by interacting with people and by having to have that energy, then you need to make sure that your offers don't require those kinds of engagements that will drain you, because you're not going to enjoy it. You're not going to do it. And it will kind of turn you off and it will create problems for you. So that's another example of how recognizing things that aren't within your core competencies can affect things. So with that quick intro, identifying your core competencies for this thing has two elements, and I want to be very clear so that you can understand each one. The first piece, and the first thing you need to think about, is what are your areas of expertise. So this is not about personality or innate abilities, but areas where you have built up expertise and knowledge. So some of this, for me, for example, the legal stuff, when I started out, clearly that was a core competency. That was an area of expertise. But just as importantly, there were things that weren't directly related to my like the niche or the subject matter, but were in my core competencies because I had built up those skills. For example, I had been public speaking and engaged in persuasive writing for over 25 years when I started my online business. So the ability to speak to people, to speak in a way that would be convincing, to organize thoughts, etc., those are skill sets that I had built up. Those are expertise that I had built over time. So the first piece of the work here is to identify those things. It's your expertise of knowledge type of expertise and skills that you have built up. Now, these should obviously be things that are relevant or could be relevant to your online business. For example, I have, a knowledge about brewing beer. That's not relevant to my core competencies. We'll get to that. That actually is something that can come in later, but I don't teach people about how to brew beer, so that's not a core competency. It's something I'm good at. It's something I have a skill for, but not related to my business. So this first piece is identify those areas of expertise and skill sets you've built up that are particularly related to how you anticipate helping people in the online space. That's the first part of core competencies. The next part is understanding your personality and your innate kind of abilities, superpowers, strengths, weaknesses, whatever you want to call it. But these are the more kind of personality driven things. Now, I do want to be clear here. I know a lot of people who talk about their Enneagram type, their Myers-Briggs, their MBTI, they'll call it, their DISC assessment, and all of those things. And that's a good start. Taking those kinds of assessments is helpful, but that's not your core competency. So for example, my core competency is not that I am an ENFP. Like that's not a core competency. That's a fact about me. The core competency requires me to go deeper, and it's based upon what I've done is, I'll just tell you, my favorite assessments are the Myers-Briggs, the DISC assessment, and then the Gallup Strengths Finders. And when you take those in combination, you'll start to see some trends. So when I take the ENFP, okay, so the Myers-Briggs, my result is ENFP. If you look at that type, that personality type, it is sometimes called the performer. Again, in looking at that, you start to recognize that now I'm starting to see some core competencies that would come from it, that naturally I will probably be someone who enjoys performing for other people. Again, it also is confirmed by my Gallup Strengths Finders, which, by the way, if you can only take one, I suggest that one. It is a much more refined level, but it identifies that my core competencies really relate to influence and strategy. Those are the areas that I shine, and it gets even more granular than that. But then also, if you take that assessment, you'll get bullet point results that are really more detailed. And what I want you to do is take those kinds of assessments, but then for your core competencies, what you need to do is, what are the key learnings from that? And this is an example on the core competencies I talked about. If you're an introvert, you need to understand, hey, this is a weakness more than a competency, but understand I am not someone who gets energy. I will be drained if I'm interacting with a lot of people. So I need to know that about myself. Whereas if you're an extrovert, you should know I will get energy generally from interacting with lots of people. So knowing those things, that's the kind of insight that you're trying to get out of it. Or if you recognize that you're very analytical and that you can kind of pick up on details, those are the insights about your innate abilities that go into your core competency. So once you've done that, you've looked at your expertise and skill sets, and then your personality type, you start to create this list of, here are the things that I will be good at. And as a result, we're going to try to figure out a way to magnify those in the business that we ultimately plan. So that's the goal here. Your work in the core competencies is to fill those things in, to identify the places where you are strong that could affect your business. So that's core competencies. Next up, we're going to talk about core values. So I will see you in the next lesson where we'll dive into this. The core value concept, which is not necessarily about what you're good at, but things you believe. So I will see you in the next lesson.